chat with you and at least start the conversation on positive behavior supports and trauma-informed care and Franklin County procedures and how do all those pieces fit together. So as the director of psychology and a psychologist, I am blessed to oversee a group of about 12, 13 people, everywhere from our admin assistants that schedule human rights committee reviews about restrictive behavior supports, to our clinicians who are out and about in early childhood, in the school, and serving adults who are county board eligible. So all our work is directly focused on individuals who are already in the county board system, many of whom we share with you guys. So I would also then like to know who's in the room so we can kind of guide our conversation. So you're going to stay with us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Lindsay Douglas. I am a program director and behavior analyst at the secondary school at Bridgeway.
Okay. So you have those BCBA credential things or whatever that's called. Okay. All right. And so how many of the behavior specialists do we have then?
Here? In this room or all together?
Well, we'll start with here.
Okay.
Okay. And then in the building or in the program?
Yeah, we have over 10 BCBAs between both buildings.
I think 14.
Huh?
I think it's 14 now.
14.
Wow.
And then there's 2 program directors that are behavior analysts that oversee programming in the secondary school, and 3 at the primary.
Okay, so the whole Bridgeway program has 14 behavior analysts.
Yes.
Their focus is doing behavioral
They're all
assessments,
board certified.
making recommendations for students both at home and at school, or just at school?
Just at school, we do have a family partnership program.
They're behavior analysts on that team too, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so everybody sort of has their niche.
Yes.
Okay. All right, recommendations for school. Okay, and then Julie is here. All right, and are you overseeing all these behavior analysts? and-
Oh, no, that's not kind of how we're structured.
Okay.
Yeah, we all, work collaboratively, so I'm just one member of the psychology department I'm representing today.
All right. So how many
Just had a baby
psychologists?
this morning.
Woohoo! So
Oh,
how many
really?
psychs do you have altogether?
We have 3, hopefully 4 soon.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were looking to
We
hire
have a
another.
whole interview set up, so.
Okay, all right. And then ladies over here?
Hi, sorry. Lindsay had her baby.
Yeah,
Was
that's
she
news.
not supposed, she was supposed to have it
No,
last
planned
next week, right?
C-section.
And she
Planned
went in
C-section
Sunday.
for today at 9:30.
You just like dropped that in very.
Sorry.
Right, it's about relationships, it's about caring for our team members, it's all positive supports.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm the music therapy department supervisor, and there are 5 music therapists, and we have 4 music therapy interns.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. Cool, okay.
I'm Lindsay, I'm the Director of Therapy Services here at Bridgeway. I'm a speech therapist by schooling, and I oversee the 4 therapy departments: music therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. Between those departments, there's about 45 women.
Okay. A lot of people doing good stuff.
I'm Sam Lyle. I'm the secondary school speech department manager.
Okay.
We have a team of 8 over here and another team of 8 SLPs at the primary school.
Okay. Okay, and then over here,
I'm Ingrid Vogel. I'm a program director at BCBA at the primary school.
okay, and primary school for Bridgeway incorporates what grades?
Preschool through 3rd grade.
Okay.
And secondary is 4 through 12.
Okay, so primary K through 3,
Preschool.
secondary. Oh, thank you. Okay. 3, and secondary is 4 through 12. Okay. Ladies, don't get too distracted. We'll never get through this. If I can refrain from telling you about my grandson Max, who was born on Wednesday night, then we can move forward.
Would you like to share a picture?
No, because we will never get done. No. So after Ingrid is
Beth's teacher.
Beth?
Beth. I am also a program director and board certified behavior analyst.
Okay. In
At
primary
the
or
primary
secondary?
school, primary.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then?
I'm Alexa Reck. I'm a speech therapist here at the secondary school. I'm here primarily because of interest in the topic, and I recently presented for some of the staff on the state social and emotional learning standards, which referenced this topic a good bit, so I thought I needed to know more.
Okay. All right. Okay, so in starting the conversation,
So our emails are migrating to a Gmail platform, so
Oh, yeah, you
I'm
told me.
having trouble finding, like,
oh,
accessing my old emails. So I did that from
thank you.
recall. I think that's basically what I
Yes.
suggested.
Yes, so when Julie reached out to me, the request was, what is the Franklin County Board doing in terms of trauma responsive focus, trauma-informed care? How are we teaching people? How are we weaving it into our rules and processes of positive behavior support? One of the last questions, I think, was how the heck does this fit with traditional ABA principles and things like that? So I would like, and if you will help us go there, if you go to the Franklin County Board of DD website, which is the fcbd.org, services, psychology, and scroll down a little bit on that page to where you see all the blue links there in the center. I'd like, please, for us to go to the Behavior Support Procedures Manual dated January 2018. In this manual is where, and if we'll scroll down, we want to make sure that it's the one dated 2018 when we updated and we wove in a lot more of the kind of the background, the philosophy. So without boring you and reading pages, we'll just scroll to the table of contents, please. And there's intentionally blank pages because we hope everybody copies it two-sided. So what I will point out to you here is that in the introduction, that is where we talk about how does this all fit together, okay? So we're not reinventing anything. Our trauma-responsive, trauma-informed work is all based on the Samsa 6 Principles of Trauma Care. It's based on the DODD Positive Culture Initiative that came out, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. It's based on the Positive Behavior, PBIS, forget the I. It's either instructional or something. It's that whole system of modules where they teach teachers how to, within the Ohio Department of Education guidelines, make sure that the focus is on the positive, least restrictive supports. So all of this is woven in. In this manual, you will not find our pictures of the hand brain or the really cool colored slide that compares a typically developing brain to one of a child who has experienced neglect or abuse. That's a whole nother teaching program that we offer. But that information is what we base this on, right? So if there is interest in additional training, like a formal Trauma-Informed Care 101, those are actually offered free through the State Department of DD and Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. And when we're done here, we can click on that link and I can show you where to go for more information. About 6 years ago now, after the Newtown, Connecticut school shootings, Governor Kasich allotted about $5 million and said, look, go do something, inform people, make a difference with our kids. And so the partners at the table were the DD head state people and the mental health and addiction services people. So they divided our state into 6 regions. And so on a regional basis, you all by geography are part of the Central Trauma-Informed Care Collaborative. So Julie, if you or one of your team within the bigger Bridgeway organization wants to get in that loop, you just need to email me and we'll get you on the mailing list. We'll get you in the loop for the forums that we have where people come and share their programs and what's working. Everything from mobile crisis units in Licking County to the Delaware County joint venture with law enforcement, and there's just all kinds of stuff going on. I think it's in November, we have the Mount Carmel Crisis team coming, their rape team, their trauma unit, you know, this whole expanding quickly ways of looking at what the heck is trauma, what's adversity, and why do we need to know this when we're serving our kids with special needs. So in chapter 2 then is where we talk a little bit about the 6 Samsa principles of trauma care. And then if we'll scroll down, if any of your team are actually assessing your children, recommending restrictives that by definition would have to go through the Franklin County Board Human Rights process, then some of this detail is very important to you, the consents and all that kind of stuff. So the first 2 chapters are really that background, right? And then the other information there is all the details and the logistics of the process, okay? So if we continue to scroll, please, and we stop here, this whole appendices section, when you click on this link and you say, oh my Lord, 180 pages? Well, I found it the other day, or I was reminded, it's 137 on 108. Most of it are the references and the resources for our service coordinators, for any stakeholder, i.e. your team and your colleagues who can't join us today. And so if you are, again, writing things that are restrictive, that by definition need to go through human rights, you would want to be clear on all of these forms, and you would ideally be using these templates. It's not mandatory. If you're not coming through our review process, if Bridgeway is following the Ohio Department of Education rules, it does say in the DODD behavior support rule about restrictions that ideally schools are following ODE and they're good with that, and so you can run through that process. We think we've got some pretty good suggestions here about templates and how to weave in somebody's history of adversity and life experiences that may have impacted why and wherefore they're making these really dangerous decisions, and why perhaps they're not at grade level or age expectation on social emotional content, right? And so all of those forms are here. If we scroll down a little bit,
More.
keep going. I think we want to go all the way to page 7, please. Because again, we have included, we've tried to set this up so it looks sort of like the old yellow books, you know, behavior support for dummies or behavior procedures for dummies. Very simple. So on this summary, if we scroll down just a tad further, perfect. All of those trauma principles and all of that training about basic brain functioning, right? Brain stem, emotional center, frontal lobe, and when we go offline and we're not sure if what's happening around us is safe, or if we've built relationships with someone and we go offline and now we're functioning from a survival mode in the brain stem, that's what we try to include here. The basis for all of our trauma work is, instead of saying what's wrong with them, what's their diagnoses, how many labels can we give them, how many medications do they take, we're really just looking at what are the life experiences of this person. And you must ask the second question, what has this person done to survive? So our kids with autism, who by definition see the world differently, see the world in very unique ways, some of their choices, they're just trying to get through the moment like you and I. Only sometimes they don't realize the safety that they've not considered or lack thereof, right? And so we're just looking here, and I believe specifically one of the questions that Julie shared or asked was, how does this fit with the traditional functional analysis, right? We say that kids are doing something to get attention. And in a trauma-informed, trauma-responsive way of thinking, or that lens through which we look, make sure you can still see it, and not right on your smartboard. what our trauma brain research tells us is that in a traditional view, when we say Susie's looking for attention, and sometimes we have educators or families that say, well, that's a problem. Or they say, well, we're giving them 100% of our attention, because if not, they hurt themselves, they hurt others, they trash the room, whatever. What our brain trauma stuff says is, where can we look in that child's life, that person's situation, and help them to feel more connected, accepted, and loved? And I get it. In a manual and in our conversation, it seems extremely simplistic. But we have had some really good outcomes when we have had teams and direct service providers allow themselves to look at the recommendations and actually intervene or interact with individuals in a different way. Because again, when we talk about what are they doing to survive, sometimes that yelling and screaming is their way of surviving. Because if I'm confused, I don't know the content, I don't understand what you're asking me to do in my therapy session, if I scream loud enough and long enough, maybe somebody will just walk away and then I can re-regulate. So our goal is trying to get teams to help the folks re-regulate. It's all about the regulation. And so our work has swung, our pendulum is swinging to where we're trying to get folks to do more prevention. It was always about the intervention. Well, we need a manual restraint for blah, blah, blah. And there was very little emphasis on replacement skills. So I will pick on Alexa, who's blessed to focus on the social emotional learning, and it fits right in with our work, saying where in the curriculum or in the day-to-day interactions with this individual are you working to build their coping skills, their understanding of the social emotional part of the world. And so our, and first of all, I guess I should have said 15 minutes ago, that the board, the Franklin County Board, is moving away in our vocabulary from this whole concept of behavior plan. So you serve kids in an education system, they have an IEP. If they are also served by the County Board of Disabilities, they have an ISP. And we're trying to say they don't need any more plans. Just weave in the important information about the child and talk about risks and talk about strengths and what's important to them and for them, and weave all of these behavioral guidelines and suggestions into the IEP and or service plan, right? And in your meetings with our county board service coordinators, you might start to hear a little more about this vocabulary with, you know, we're not contracting with people to write behavior plans. We're using their subject matter expertise to do behavioral assessments. And then just like Julie and I would write a psychological evaluation and have the test scores and the interpretation of that and the recommendations from that, that's what our behavior specialists are doing too. So they are evolving to where maybe not the whole team is signing off on that evaluation, because I'm the subject matter expert and I've done it and I've interviewed all of you, and now we've agreed as a group how we think we can support this young person. And so those recommendations, this behavioral assessment now sits as collateral that informs the IEP and the ISP. Okay? So we're trying to get more people to look and bridge our traditional functions to the which of these behaviors that are being exhibited. And again, for this conversation, we're focused on the dangerous, the risky stuff. The things that get in the way of learning. The things, Julie, I think you also on the list, we were talking about how we can help all of our students understand when the brain goes offline for a classmate or the kid across the hall, right? Because we're all supposed to live and be part of our school family, and it's really hard when a friend, a classmate is struggling. And oh, by the way, it's hard for us as adults to watch our colleagues get through those moments and need somebody's help and then debrief from these incidents and, oh my gosh, how am I going to get up tomorrow and come back in here and do this again, right? So we are looking at these in terms of helping us bridge to a more trauma-informed, trauma-responsive way of doing our work. Okay. So again, this is the procedures manual. This is what we use to guide our behavior specialists from all different educational settings, our colleagues down at Nationwide Children's Hospital, knowing that within a program, you all as a business entity may have certain pieces and parts that as a program, if you're going to do a manual restraint, we use this set of stuff. Whether it's, company XYZ, the TCI, the Aegis, there's, anybody out there who has copywritten a program can present that. I don't know, has anybody done the responding to a person in crisis training at the county board?
Yes,
Yes.
a few of those stuff,
Okay.
and then we train all of our staff on this procedure.
Okay, so how recently have you done that?
In August.
Just,
You
okay,
mean gone to the county?
yes,
We had a few
We had
people
a
go
few
last
people
year.
Yeah, it was sometime last year.
okay. So Patrick Keenest probably taught that class. What a blessing, he's so dynamic, he's so passionate. And even the manual that you brought back with you didn't have all the slides he used that day, because he is constantly updating his slides and his little motivational things within that program. So that material is really what you need if Bridgeway is interested in moving forward and educating more of your staff or your parents or even some of your upper school, your secondary kiddos. Because how powerful is that to have that understanding of how your brain and body works? And the beauty of the trauma work, the Samsa work, the ACEs study, all of those things, is that it applies to all of us. We're all human mammals whose brain's development starts at the lowest level, moves up, that whole downstairs, upstairs model, the back to front model, to help us understand. And if we can get a child with picture symbols, with social stories, with whatever means they need to understand how their brain's working, and the fact that every directive we give them, every encouragement we give them, every assignment we give them has to first go through that emotional center, and they have to process, do they perceive safety and validity in that connection, right? They might know how to do XYZ that you're giving them, but if you're a different person giving the directive, if it's in a different place in the room, all those things that impact the understanding and the functioning of a young person with autism, the meltdowns are possible, right? And so we know how to take it away from the traditional and move it into a new way of thinking. So, thoughts or questions? Sometimes I encourage people to maybe visualize a child or two, a situation or two, that if I transition my way of thinking to this newer neurobiological based way of thinking, I wonder if it would make it, thinking of Susie or Abdi, and well, maybe if I try XYZ it would be different, moving away. Another one of the questions that Julie posed is, how does all this fit with the traditional ABA? And I will tell you that in some cases it doesn't. It really doesn't. A traditional ABA might talk about the planned ignoring, other more traditional preventives and interventions. And sometimes you look at these trauma principles and you look at this whole, I have to feel connected, I have to feel valued, I have to feel safe. And the vocabulary doesn't necessarily match. I would like to think that whether we're using ABA or not, we still value that individual that we're supporting, right? We still are looking for ways that our music, our speech and language, whatever our specialty area might be, we are looking to move them from not knowing how to do something to the mastery level, right? Your color-coded boxes, your different content areas, your different treatment goals on a therapy plan, right? That we are moving forward with that. So again, as a program, Bridgeway would have to say, and any of us doing the traditional ABA with folks who have autism, would have to say, if our traditional techniques are not working in this situation with this child, am I willing to step outside that traditional box and do it a little bit different? Because if the person is looking to feel connected, accepted, and loved, and I do planned ignoring, am I actually exacerbating the brain and the dysregulation of that person? And how do we find that sweet spot, that balance between teaching them all the things that we try to teach them socially, emotionally, facial recognition, social cues, things like that, with the reading, writing, arithmetic, tying my shoes, brushing my hair, following a schedule, etc. Okay. So, anybody have a particular child in mind, a particular situation, an example they would want to share? Yes, ma'am. What do we got?
Two questions. First, you talked about like students potentially attending something like this, the idea of training. Are there particular sessions designed toward students? Are you thinking like, we come and we take our chances with how that goes?
So, question for our video procedure. First question is sessions and training for all different ages and stages and roles. So I would defer to you all. If you have had your staff attend that responding to a person in crisis, or any other trauma-informed training that's out there about the brain and the brain functioning, etc., I would say, because you know your students, you are probably quite competent to do that training. You start in small doses. You weave it into the social emotional curriculum. Sort of, I envision like health class, right? We talk more about how to make a baby
Yeah,
than
in
we
some
do.
of the classes it does get worked in.
Okay.
I also know sometimes there's a power in hearing it from someone else, or, you know, the novelty of the situation can
Sure.
sometimes grab someone's attention in a different way.
Yeah. So the county is very open to providing those trainings. Also, we have some folks through that collaborative that I mentioned, the DD. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
The DD and mental health collaboratives that are specific to school age. Now, I cannot guarantee that they know all the different types of disabilities, they know all the different ages and stages, but if you have a specific ask, we put that out there through our list serve and say, the Bridgeway program is looking for this, this, this. Their audience would potentially be so-and-so and such and such. And then we would see who, not just in the central region, but throughout our state, who is already doing that work, would be willing to come, right? And I know that there are folks who are very adept at adapting, and they work very hard at having good evaluations so that you don't feel like this speaker knows the content of trauma principles. Inside, outside, upside down, he or she did not understand who we are, who we serve, things like that. I hate that, right? And it's a struggle because if many of you have been around more than 2 or 5 years, you could probably stand up and teach the class, right? We should swap, right? You come teach my people, I'll come teach your people, so that it's a different voice, a different presentation, right? That will profit in your own town phenomenon. Your subject matter experts are probably in your building, but because you see each other all the time, you might not realize that. You might not, be as open to hearing from that person that is already on your team. So there are training opportunities, and certainly taking that RPC as a starting point with the trauma stuff, and then what we'll look at on the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services website. And then you said you had a second question.
Services for families and parents. Are
Okay.
they attending these trainings? Are they hearing about it from their service coordinator? Are there things we should connect them to?
So for parents,
What we often hear.
parents and families, all are welcome at this Responding to a Person in Crisis RPC program. We have had maybe a couple of family members come. Everybody's busy, right? Everybody's working. Oh my gosh, a whole 6 hours, are you kidding me? And so they look for, the 1 hour shot and I just need something else that's gonna fix myself or my loved one. And, you know, true confessions, people are still looking for the easy fix, right? That's not news to you. Why is my music therapy not going to help my kid, you know, stop yelling at me or, you know, running after the baby or whatever they're doing? They're looking for us to have our pixie dust. And this trauma-informed work is not that easy. It's about changing our recognition of our own brain functioning, because Lord only knows when I come in and I'm in brainstem functioning because life is happening, and now I'm supposed to interact and de-escalate my student. It's not a pretty, what is that, bell curve, right? When we're both at the top and it's not a pretty picture. And so it's really about conscious discipline, being aware of my own state. Am I in survival state versus emotional state versus thinking state? Using some simple vocabulary. So, short version, yes, families are welcome to come to that training. Again, if Bridgeway would want to take a piece of that RPC and offer it to your families, because again, it can be an extension of your parent, teacher, school support stuff. It can be an extension of, you know, healthy family sort of a perspective. You're welcome and encouraged to do that. I can tell you that within our early childhood program, we have a mental health professional by credential. She's an LPCC, and we have a behavior support specialist who works with both our home-based population and our center-based group. And they are both working more and more to interweave this idea of conscious discipline and being aware of your own state of brain and how you then are able to de-escalate and better regulate yourself and others. And so we're making some slow inroads. You know, when Julie and I were emailing back and forth and talking about, could we tour, you know, can we see models? And again, we're also in the beginning stages, and as you can imagine, when there's 150 staff, you got that whole, what is it, pendulum, or that whole continuum, where we've got some people that all we had to say was, it's going to help you and your kids, and they were on the bandwagon. Let me soak it up. Let me try it. Give me some materials. And then we had other people. My favorite example is the staff person at the little afternoon staff meeting we had, and we were talking about the must-dos. And is it a must-do when a child is already in an emotional survival state of functioning that you go in their space? You know, we're always telling the kids, oh, mind your space, and then we get right in their space because you need to look at me when I talk to you. Finger up, right here, like 6 inches. And we tried to explain why we had a different way of doing it and a better way in terms of regulation. And this wonderful long-term teacher said, I have a way of running my classroom. If they look at me, I know they're listening to me. Da, 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 da. And we said, okay, thank you for being honest. Mental note, we need to be in that classroom more often, so that we could help her see the different outcomes when you're not in somebody's personal space and you're not literally power over instead of power with, right? And in our trauma support work, our trauma responsive work, that in itself is interesting. About 6 years ago, it was, you know, trauma-informed care. You see the acronym TIC, T-I-C, trauma-informed care. And on the one hand, I was like, Lord, we keep adding new acronyms to our world. And I thought, you know, all the people with the tic disorder are not going to be very happy about this. Then we said, well, you know, it's not just about being informed. You can come to a training. You went to Patrick's training. You've heard all these people about, oh, we should do this, and how many people are going to OPALICon next month, right? We're going to learn some more. We're going to network. If we don't come back and use that information and actually be responsive based on that lens, it's not quite as good as it could be, right? It's great to have certain knowledge, but if we don't use it to improve the lives of ourselves, our classrooms, our families and children, what's the point, right? So, and hi, I'm Angela. Who are you?
Autumn.
Hi, Autumn.
Yes.
Welcome to the group. You have to know that if you have a question, you have to say it really loud because they're videotaping. For our friends that can't be here today. So we've talked about the opportunities for training. What else? Families, kids, differences in ages and stages. So what's going on in the primary program with some of this stuff? What's already in place to help those kids understand their brains and the states of their brains? Anybody know?
I mean, I would say if you look at the preschool standards are very social and emotional based, and so they start there with teaching a lot of those skills from the get-go with the youngest students.
Okay, and do they actually talk about brain states like, oh my gosh, my feelings are just overflowing and things like that, using age-appropriate
Yeah,
language?
it depends on the developmental
Okay.
level of the students, but
Great,
those are all things that we work
Okay.
on. Coordinating and collaborating with psychologists, OT, speech,
great,
music, everybody.
okay. Okay. And so that sort of segues nicely to another question that was on our list, was about how do we help all of us in the classroom understand better what might be happening to our classmate. And one of the things, and again, it sounds really simple, and I hope you weren't looking for something like way out here, you know, go look at this article or so-and-so's research. It's really about using what's already available, our children's books about similarities and differences. My favorite people are the kids' librarians, right? Because they know, and more people are writing books about how my brain works, whether that's for the kids diagnosed with ADHD, whether that's for the kids diagnosed with autism. They've started to have out there already published stuff that when everybody comes to the mat and it's book time or circle time, we can talk about that. Are there opportunities where, to the best of the person's ability, they can lead the discussion and the child gets to sit in the, you know, the whatever chair, the leader's chair, and talk about the brace that they have on their leg? Or why do they go see, wait, I have to remember. Like, where did we start? Oh my gosh. Oh, we started with Lindsay. Julie's there. And there's my glasses, because I can't read what I wrote. Where's our music people? Tanya, there it is. Yes. So, do our children have opportunity to share with their classmates and their siblings why they go to music therapy, why they go to PT? What is it? Well, you know, my body works in such and such a way that I can't hold, I don't know how you hold that pencil, I can't do that. And in some way, shape, or form, again, picture symbols, drawings, explaining that, you know what, it's actually really cool that if there's 20 kids in my class, we all work a little differently, right? You're really good at this, I'm really good at that, I can help you with this, because when you do, here's a little fun fact, when any of us as human beings do something nice for ourselves, right? We bring our favorite drink to the conversation, we take self-care, it's one shot of dopamine. It calms us at a very simple level. When we do something nice for somebody else, we hold the door, we go to the food pantry, we, you know, help somebody with their paper. It's a double shot of dopamine. And so it truly is a physiological phenomenon. When we volunteer, we truly do feel physically, neurologically better than maybe some of the folks that we served and supported in that setting, right? So it's those little tidbits of knowledge that might help us to set up our classroom differently, or further encourage those helping behaviors and the buddy system and all those kinds of things. Because our brains are truly improved or saturated with happy hormones, and Lord knows when you understand the world differently, comma, i.e. have a diagnosis of autism, sometimes that's not an easy thing. And how I understand it and how I tell you that I understand it is not always safe and happy and healthy. And so if we are looking at these little pieces of brain functioning, maybe we can set up our interactions differently. Maybe we can, instead of the rules that talk just about, you know, body stuff like hands to self, feet to self, quiet voice, things like that. Maybe we need some classroom rules that talk about make sure you're helping your friend, make sure, you know, if you're the tall kid in the class, you get to be the reacher helper today. It's all that little stuff that, again, will build the happy hormones, which by default hopefully reduces cortisol and adrenaline, which dumps you back into survival brain and brainstem functioning. We've had some good examples. I love my walking partner on Wednesday night is a third grade teacher, mostly, quote, typical kids, whatever that is. They have their own issues of adversity, not autism, but other things. And she has been able to get some of her children to actually learn the vocabulary. You know, I'm in the back of my brain, or I'm in my brain stem, and you know what, when I threw that chair, that's where I was. Now I'm in the frontal lobe, I am more regulated, and we can, you know, work through that situation and debrief. So it's those little things that ideally we would work towards those outcomes. Okay? So that's the manual. So let's click out of the manual, please.
Let me go back to the.
So let's take, just a moment here. We're back on the Franklin County Board Psychology page. And that, what else do we need here? If you're interested in your staff coming to training at the board in 2020, here's the memo that you need to reference. That'll have our dates there. And if you scroll down, my wonderful secretary has highlighted them here. Okay? So that is available. And again, this is open to anybody. We prioritize our 30 spots to each class for county board employees. But if we have space, all are welcome. And again, it is free. Okay? So if we'll click out of that one, please. Minutes, manual. The only other one, when you guys are doing behavior assessments, are you using this template or do you have your Bridgeway template?
For now, we have a Bridgeway template. I have completed the bar to put in an ISP before, but since we're more school oriented and less
Right.
it was for a home thing.
Perfect. Okay. And our bottom line, I mean, we just tried to make life simple for our volunteers at the human rights process. So the templates were the same, and if they want to know about the medication, they go to this section. If they want to know about replacement skills, they go here. It just makes it much easier, because who wants to volunteer when it's a mishmash? So those are here for your use if you so choose. So instead of Franklin County Board, we're going to stay on the internet, please, but we want to go to mhas.ohio.gov. And with any luck, that will take us to mental health and addiction services. And we can hopefully find our way to the trauma collaboratives. Oh, MHA, I'm sorry. My bad. So it is this one in the middle. There we go. So within this, let's see if, do we have a search bar up here? So let's, trauma collaboratives, we'll start with that. Trauma-informed care, trauma regional collaboratives, that's where we want to go, please. So it just gives you a little bit of background. It gives you our little map over here, so you can kind of see where your colleagues would be participating in these regional collaboratives. It's a really nice match with providers of DD services, both education, residential, adults, children, and all the partners then in mental health, in law enforcement, in, gosh, what else? You name it, we've probably done it, hospitals and doctors' offices. So the word is starting to get out, and that little link that says, here how trauma care has helped Ohioans, we don't need to go there today. We've not yet videotaped any teens or older elementary kids. These are adult videos, mostly from the southeast region of the state. Again, how they themselves and the people who support them, by changing the lens, really made a difference. So all of this is out here. I will tell you that the website is not what is updated most frequently. People are out in the world, you all every day doing this great work in your school and in our different clinics and so forth. There's not a lot of people whose job it is to actually update the website. So when you look at the central region and you say, wait a minute, this is like from 2015, yes it is. But I just want you to know that it's out there, and if Julie or somebody from the program wants to be on that list, you just email me and I'll make sure the right people get the information. Okay? Let's see, there's another question. Just went in and out of my head. What else are you thinking while you're doing your self-care? I love it. We're moving, we're drinking, we're getting some fresh air. It's getting warm in here. Oh, yeah.
Crack a window, everybody's looking at that.
Whatever you need. Everybody get taken care of? I noticed several people went right at the same time. I don't know if that was a student or...
That's my favorite drink.
Oh, well, that's important, right? To get more of our favorite drink. That's important, right? So here's an interesting phenomenon. We've had this happen too, where, our schools are set up in a certain way. We follow schedules. We have our must-dos. Breaks happen at this time, and change of class happens because of this and at this time with these people. And not that I am promoting, mass chaos, because that's not effective for brains either. But I guess I would encourage you all to look at, are there any opportunities that you haven't yet explored where a brain that goes offline under certain conditions can be allowed a slightly different schedule or a slightly different way of doing things. And you may already be right on this. For example, if this is our table where we're supposed to be doing our work, and my brain is like offline and I need to be moving or I need to be bouncing, are you all already employing, and our OTs are wonderful at that, so that's already going on?
Most definitely.
Awesome.
The behavior analysts who help in the classroom with our behavior issues are always talking to speech and OT, PT about seating, music therapy for like what kind of songs can help transition, speech as far as what kind of communication can a child be accessing to get their needs met, and then OT of course for any of the sensory stuff that masquerades as behavior.
Well, so here's another interesting phenomenon that I have found. When your job title is psychologist or behavior analyst or behaviorist or whatever it might be, sometimes we only get called in when there's a problem. Instead of, from the get-go, how can we set up this environment before the brainstem functioning kicks in? How can we, with all of our different lenses, music and motor and mental health, come into an environment and do our best to set it up so that it's much less likely that some of this disruptive, dangerous, risky stuff is going to happen in the first place. That's a huge part of the trauma lens also. If we know things like you get a double shot of dopamine for helping somebody else, how can we set up our classroom, our building, our culture in such a way that that happens more rather than less? How can we set up our classes from the get-go to where we've got our sensory stuff regulated? Because we know when our senses are regulated, so is the brain, right? It's all connected. And somehow behavior got a bad rap. Behavior has become this negative thing. We're all still not in the cemetery, popping up daisies, so we're engaged in behaviors. And that's really hard for some people. It's like, when they talk about behaviors, it's only the bad stuff. Or, you're the behavior teacher. No, she teaches children. And again, because they are alive and learning and growing, we hope that they are engaged in behaviors. And so some of that teaching and training and overlapping with families is even helping them understand this stuff back here, there is no thought involved. It's survival. It's eat, sleep, pee, poop, temperature regulation, etc. So when that emotional center senses danger, danger, I don't know what to do in this situation, they're going to default to survival mode because that's how we're hot wired, right? The kids in the orphanage, the kids in foster care that are oppositional defiant, they're not the kids that die. They're the kids that fight through the situation. The kids that figured out how to pee and poop on themselves, they're just trying to survive, because if you're smelly, stinky, gross, maybe the person who's going to abuse you is going to move on, right? Or the person that you perceive as unsafe is going to move on. That was the other question that was on the list. How the heck are we even defining trauma? And it was a very interesting perspective. We had a conversation similar to this with our colleagues at Nationwide Children's. And when we were talking about them doing assessments and the children in their homes, so not under the ODE umbrella, but in their children's clinic or in the children's homes, they said, you know, we're really confused because Children's Hospital has a trauma clinic. And in their narrow definition, it's about abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and some neglect for the children that are already linked with children's services. And we said, oh no, our trauma lens, the mental health and addiction, DD collaboratives, that lens is much broader. It's sort of a floodlight view, if you will, of adversity based on an expansion or an extension of the ACE study. You know, the Adverse Childhood Experience study was with adults who were working, who had health insurance, who lived in Southern California. So it's really good information. It's good reading for you all if you are not familiar with it. Since 1998, they've been publishing all kinds of articles about it. They have a handy dandy 10-item questionnaire, the ACE questionnaire. But what we found is it's not only those 10 categories that they've given us. Because by definition, when you look different, when you process the world around you differently, people are going to interact with you differently. Sometimes that's in a really positive way, that's a welcoming way, that's a we don't care what you look like or sound like, come join the party because you're just one of us. And then other times, as you are well aware, it's a not so positive. It's an exclusionary way of treating individuals. And if my brain has been excluded from the time of birth, what does that do to my brain? What does that do to my efforts to say, you know, I look in the mirror and metaphorically say, I'm okay. I am a good person. I'm worth it. Many, many, many people in this world don't know how to do that because nobody's ever told them that. Or, even better, nobody's ever acted and modeled that and put the hand out and said, come on, be part of our group. And so our kids with autism, I mean, pick a group based on color, religion, sexual orientation. Welcome to 2019, right? There's lots of reasons why people exclude. And so within the Bridgeway program, within your family education and bigger model of interactions, where can we do more of the inclusion? Because trauma isn't about, again, legally substantiated stuff or these 10 categories. It's, my life has been really hard, comma, and nobody taught me how to cope with that, right? So remember we talked in our little manual that one of the big trauma things is what adversities have you experienced and what have you done to survive? So when we assess adversity, we must also assess protective factors and resilience, right? Because we know 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people in the room, we are all experiencing the exact same moment, right? We're having a conversation, we're sharing information, one of us is tired, one of us is like, oh my God, will you hurry up because I don't want to get in traffic? You know, oh my gosh, I forgot to do such and such, right? Depending on our protective factors, our response to that and our level of brain state will differ. If we assume that Julie's in charge of when we start and when we finish, and you have a really good relationship with Julie, you're not real worried about getting gas or getting home on time or getting whatever, because you know Julie's gonna meet your needs. If you had to say to Julie before we started, hey, I gotta go 5 minutes before, and you have a good relation, great, protective factors supporting you to move through that moment, right? I come to a training and I have X people in the room and I get nothing, right? Don't you hate, you go to a concert, you go to a play, there's nothing because there's no interaction, right? It's really hard to build it up and make it great when there's nothing back and forth. If people aren't doing this for 30 plus years, I mean, that'll freak people out. That's why people are, I hate public speaking. Oh my gosh, that's a real thing. So what are we doing to address the inclusion stuff? What are we doing to say that, and again, this is maybe a slide from the RPC stuff, because we need to understand that the protective factors are important so that when we're all experiencing the same event, we can move through it in a healthy, positive way, right? We talked about self-care. If you had any inkling that when you stood up to stretch out or you needed a refill, that somebody was going to stop you at the door and say, excuse me, it is about me and we're not finished and you need to sit down. If you had no options, what does that do to your brain? And how many people in lives, both in our classrooms, in our coworkers, right? People you see drive down the street, have never had a voice and a choice, or have very minimum, right? Or they have voice and choice when somebody else says they have voice and choice, right? And so you are well aware, you're educators and specialists that have our, PhDs and XYZs and so forth and certifications. So we have some content knowledge about the importance of human development and human interactions. So really that's, you can call it trauma responsive care, you can go to collaborative meetings and OCALICON conferences, but it really just comes down to that inclusion and building protective factors and saying together we will get through this. We have power with each other to move through this. We have power through music and movement and learning new things about our brains and bodies, and empowering each other to say, I need to, again, learn, because it doesn't usually happen by osmosis, right? Learn to make my needs known. It is okay, or it should be okay, to say, you did an assessment and you think I might like to bounce. But tomorrow I'm tired of bouncing, or something happened and I fell off, that would be me, can never do the balls that Jazzercise, right? Now let me just go stand against the wall, thank you very much. Right? You gotta know your own brain and body and be empowered to say, no thank you. So where can we do that in our program, right? Where can we weave that into the social emotional learning, right? So the trauma / adversities isn't only those 10 categories. Those are important categories, the actual abuse and also the dysfunctional stuff. When somebody that we know has a mental illness diagnosis, or somebody's family member was in jail, or what's the other one? Alcohol abuse, drug abuse, domestic violence. Those things may or may not be happening. But think about how, and this is, I know this happens in our system, right? We start in our school district, and we start in this #1 placement, and that doesn't work so well. And then we try #2, and then we go down this continuum of let's try to meet the kid with autism and their needs. And then at some point, after bouncing around here and there and everywhere, they land with you. For some of our kids, why would they trust you? Why would they think this was going to be a place? This is like their 8th placement by the 3rd grade. It's one more place for them to probably screw it up. And so you all are probably already working really hard. Again, that hand out, welcome to Bridgeway. How can we get you into the system, the program, the welcoming? I love all the stuff out there. There's faces, that these kids are real to each other, not just from an adult to a kid, but from one kid to another. And you probably have really great examples of where they're already helping each other. Or maybe your 8th graders help well, they can't help the 1st graders, they're not in the same building, right? But how do you pair them up? Maybe a 3rd grader with a pre-K and that ninth grader with the fourth grader, right, within the building. Because again, if I have some piece of information or some skill that I can share with you, oh my gosh, how important am I, right? If we have a small group therapy thing going on and I understand the concepts and I get to model for somebody else how to do something, it seems so little to us perhaps as the adult, but it's huge for those kids. So it's some of those little things so that we move them from the brainstem impulsive stuff to the thinking, to the, oh, this is hard, but together I know that there is some person in my world, either a classmate, a family, a teacher, therapist person who's going to help me get through it. And when I perceive that there is power with others, Lord, that is so much easier than just, I have to do this by myself, nobody understands, yuck. So, in barely an hour and 10, that's sort of the nutshell of some of the stuff that we're doing. We're expanding that definition of trauma, and oh, by the way, if this is my life story we're talking about, I don't call it trauma, I just call it life. So we don't interview people and we don't give a standardized questionnaire about, now tell me about this, bad stuff happening. Because if it's defined by me as bad, adverse, traumatic, I'm already bathing my brain in yuck. It's just life to me. So when we talk to our kids and our families about, is there something that you would change about certain situations? Then you tend to start to be able to peel the layers. If you ask people on the other end of the spectrum, what is it that brings you joy? When you're not here working at Bridgeway, what do you do to bathe your brain in self-care and positivity? When you're not here at school, Susie, what are the things that you find fun that help your brain be thinking and acting more safe? Because again, we care so much about you that we want you to be safe. We want you to perceive safety. Because I'll bet in your building you've got all kinds of policies and procedures and logistical stuff that the building isn't going to fall around us. Things aren't going to, fall off the shelf. I'm betting that you even look and say, okay, do we have enough weight and are they anchored that the kids, when they're not regulated, can pull it on top of them? But it's the perception of safety that is critical. And we look from out here, but if we never ask the child, if we never look at our space from that child's perspective, their perception of safety might not be what we think it is. It's all about perceived safety, power with people, understanding what state of the brain I'm in as the adult and how that matches up with the brain state of the child. I am loving that there are so many people on these different teams and these different perspectives, because again, if I am coming to work today knowing that my grandma's in the hospital and oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of gas on the way home, just fill in the blank, layers of yuck, I'm probably not the best person to help this kid de-escalate it. So how do I tag team? How do I trust my team members to be able to do that, right? So we quickly touched on 5 or 6 different things. I probably missed some of your expectations. If you want to put them out on the table, Julie can add that to a list for future conversations, whether it's amongst yourselves here or with myself or others. Any thoughts from the different therapeutic views?
No, I think that it's validating in a way to hear the things that you're talking about. You mentioned that maybe traditional behavior analysts or analysis might not mesh with this, but I think it really does here, if I'm honest. Like there's no part of the behavior strategies that we're provided with by our behavior analysts that I think violate these things in any way. These guys are really great about reminding us if a child is having a crisis, that we are going to make sure we're meeting their basic needs, offering them water, giving them space. So I guess I just want to say, like, I think we do a really good job of meshing the stuff that you're talking about with the scientific principles of ABA.
Awesome. And sometimes that is the biggest takeaway from a conversation like this, is to validate, well, we are doing a darn good job, you know? And for your programmatic people who, you know, their job is to write the checks and to, you know, are we going to fill this psychologist position or not? And, well, how many music people do we need? I mean, come on. It's validating to be able to say the way we have it set up now is really good for all of the adults as well as for the students. So that's a very important thing. And again, whether it's myself or some other collegial program that you know of, we're all doing, most of us are doing really good things. And that's important to understand that. We have occasionally had teachers that part of our dilemma as educators and educational team members is what happens when they leave is totally out of our control. So a lot of this adversity that they may be experiencing is so gut-wrenching to us because we have no control. So what's happening in the building is awesome. Might not be the total fix, but again, as you expand to educate parents and educate caregivers and waiver providers, we all are coming together to hopefully be looking through that same trauma-informed and responsive lens.
Angela, and if anybody needs to leave, feel free, but can you give us some examples of what they're doing over at West Central to be more trauma sensitive?
I can give you a few.
School-wide type things?
I would not say that we are, well, I take that back. So, West Central, as you know, is our school-based program through the county. Our focus these days is on the transitional age children. I think maybe our youngest students might be around 14. And then we are more recently getting in a lot of students who are that 18 to 21. They've essentially finished their public school special ed, and we are offering a transition focus kind of a thing. So Dr. Turner, the principal, is just doing her darndest to help the adults in the building by validating them, by being present in classrooms and in activities with the students. So I think that's one thing. She does something called an update. Used to be every week, now it's like every 4 days, where she finds something good that's going on in that building and she sends to the entire staff thank yous and kudos and acknowledgements, trying to build unity in a culture where many of the staff have come from the ARC Industries program. They've decided that they don't like being a private adult services part of that group. They would rather come back into the county board program. You are interfacing those people who then are new to the school program, even though they've been in county board services for years, with people who've been educators for however many years, decades. You are pairing those two groups with a few, not very many, but a few who are like even new to the whole field of disabilities. So she's working to do that. She sets up committees, one of which the label is behavior support. Their focus is on the prevention and the positive efforts that should be made to reduce restraints and rights restrictions. She is setting up that behavior committee so that one of their roles is to help teaching teams see through the behavioral trauma lens what might be happening in the community when they go out, what we might need to look at in a work setting from the social emotional soft skills stuff. They can put widgets in and out, make them, put those bookcases together. It's those soft skills, social emotional skills that they're looking at. They've also incorporated a program there at West Central called The Good Life, which came from the Association of County Boards of Disabilities. And on the one hand, we go to professional development, right? And it's the program of the month or the school year. And what we've tried to do is take the vocabulary from that, looking at, again, our brain functioning of the moment and how we're interacting, and weaving that with trauma care and PBIS and so forth. So she's done that. There are a couple of classrooms where, and I'm sure you have them here, you have classrooms, you have people who, quote, get it. Their whole self just, there's positivity overflowing from that person, and you didn't have to teach it to them, right? That's just how they are. And so in those classrooms where we have those champions, there are really cool things going on that if you stood in the doorway or you sat in the back of the room and you watched the interactions, you'd say, oh yeah, that's it. There's a few classrooms that I'd say, I don't think we really want to go there because they don't get it yet. The teacher that, you know, maybe is not willing to go the extra yard to support someone before the kids get off the bus. You know, somebody had to bring them early today, or they had the meltdown 10 minutes before the bus came, and now we got to wait 30 minutes for a parent to pick them up, and things are not as positive as we would like. Early childhood, we talked about that too. Same kind of thing. In some classrooms, you'll see some of the handouts that we've given. The Dr. Bruce Perry's 6 R's, talking about regulation, relationship, rhythmic kinds of things that calm the brain. You'll see those little 8.5 by 11 posters up in some classrooms. Again, just to remind us that in the busyness of our day, where are we providing things that contribute to brain health and regulation? How do we get ourselves and everybody that is in our space back to regulation? So those are a few of the top things. We are not near the end of a journey, or it would not be accurate to say that we've achieved all that we would like to in our programs. It's a work in progress. I can tell you that Early Childhood has brought in speakers on the program. It is a, what is that word? Copywritten program called Conscious Discipline. They have brought speakers about that, and that incorporates specific exercises that might be most beneficial in your primary level. And then today, they're actually all at Franklin Park. They've brought in a speaker about mindfulness, and they're doing some team building activities and teaching some of the basic skills of mindfulness that, you know, you don't have to go to a therapist to practice them and learn them. You can do them at any time to be more centered and more in tune with the moment. So those are some of the things that are happening. We, I think as an agency, are supporting this. In fact, next Friday, our whole service coordination department has their professional development day, and they're bringing in 2 speakers, 1 a.m., 1 p.m., and the focus is just laughter, joy, humor. How do you bathe your brain in those things that are positive? Their speaker in the morning is a lady named Kay Francis, and she's a hoot. And not only is she naturally funny, she's sort of like Seinfeld. You find the humor, the joy in everyday life, and she has some background in supporting people with disabilities, and so she weaves all of that in and is just amazing in terms of how to provide yourself some care. Because again, the more we as the adults are regulated, the better we can help somebody else with those mirror neurons and that quiet voice that you all are very familiar with. So we have some good things going on. We still have some people that, and again, that whole thing, what's your story and what have you done to survive? Every one of our educators, every one of our administrators, every person in our program has their own story. And if you were never surrounded with people who validated you and allowed you different ways of thinking, and your brain wasn't ever encouraged to get more comfortable with that out of the box, it's going to be harder for you. You've got your own story. What are you doing to survive? I don't want to get hurt. I got 6 months, 3 days, and X number of hours till I retire and I can take my PERS. I don't want to get hurt, and this is how we're going to do this. That's their story. That's what they're doing to survive. So we have to honor that too. And it's been very interesting outside of our educational programs and county board people with disability. We've had really interesting conversations about life in general. the shooters who are perpetrating these crimes. What is their story? In your spare time, if you've never read it, the State Department in Connecticut, every time a child dies, they have an investigation. So when the shooter, Adam Lanza, died, they had to investigate his death too. And his story, even the short version, is what we live way too often. Oh, somebody saw such and such when he was 3, and then something else happened at 6, but he didn't get help, right? And then he gets into 3rd grade and the teacher sees the drawings that are very violent and very concerning to the but nobody knew what to do with them. Nobody could put the pieces together. And so you fast forward and you have a very violent response and tragedy happens, but he's got a story too. And so how do we look at not only our work world, but our personal world? We've had some people leave our trainings and say, well, now I understand a little bit more about Aunt Susie. Yeah, that's really what we're looking for. A deeper understanding of why people do what they do. And rather than condemning, we certainly, A, keep people safe, but we build empathy. Where in our social emotional curriculum are we actually labeling it as empathy and working concretely to build it? Because it doesn't happen by osmosis. And again, when you see the world differently and you respond differently, and sometimes people don't get it. And so now, I mean, look at where we are, right? We have things on our seatbelts that say, my brain works in a certain way, I have autism, I have cerebral palsy, whatever I have. You know, I have a sticker on the back of my car. It helps people, and so who am I to say that's not a good thing? Because it's all about helping, it's all about empowering. So thank you for spending Friday afternoon with us.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invite.